Carrie, I mean, the officials in Chicago made it clear there's no request for federal intervention in Chicago. Legally speaking, what are the governor's options if the administration sends in National Guard troops to his state?
So it's important, for us to remember that normally, if the National Guard is working under what's called state active duty, that they have the governor that is the commander-in-chief of National Guard forces. So it normally would take a president to federalize those National Guard forces, for them to perform some sort of federal mission, for the president to be in charge in anywhere besides the District of Columbia, as Andrew was describing. So we get to a situation, and I actually gamed this out in a scenario that I ran at Center for New American Security last year, where you end up litigating between a governor and the federal government as to the scope of the ability of the president to federalize National Guard and deploy it into a state or city over the governor's objection. And that's the type of thing that we are seeing play out in California as well, based on the president's deployments there last year. The difficulty with going the litigation route is it doesn't actually solve the problems that are trying to be solved. So it doesn't necessarily change the situation on the ground from the perspective of the governor, because it has to work through a litigation and a court's process. And it doesn't address the public safety issue in a longer term basis that the president is seeking to achieve.
Andrew, I mean, I want to talk about FBI agents, because they have been pulled off their regular jobs in order to round up and deport people around the country. We've seen that. And now they are in D.C. on patrol on the streets. Who picks up the slack in those areas while FBI agents are patrolling the streets in D.C.? I mean, who's doing the counterterrorism work, the narcotics work, all the work that they would normally be doing, anti-corruption work?
Yeah, Anderson, the short answer is no one. No one is filling in those holes for the FBI. The FBI is actually a very small entity. There are only about 12,000 agents spread out around the entire country. Their mission, scope of their mission is enormous, as you know, and they spend entire careers training on very specialized investigative methods, like finding and investigating terrorists, or finding and investigating spies in our counterintelligence division. People who spend their entire careers doing things like white collar crime. All of those very specialized areas of investigation that the country depends upon have been short-staffed now because of this diversion of FBI law enforcement assets to things like immigration roundups, and now what we're seeing in D.C. FBI agents are not police officers. They're not trained to go out and walk a footbeat and intercede in crimes as they're happening in front of them. I mean, I'm sure they're trying to do that now in D.C. because they're good and smart and hardworking people, so they're trying to do what they can, but it is not their background. On the other hand, that specialized workforce to do the things that they normally do is not there. So we're doing less counterterrorism work, less counterintelligence work, less work protecting our citizens and our fellow citizens from things like fraud and elder abuse and human trafficking and the exploitation of children.
And Carrie, in terms of, I mean, what are the national security implications of taking National Guard resources away from their home states? I mean, it takes them away from training on things they may have to do overseas or in other deployments.
So I do think, Anderson, there's some real risks involved in, on a long-term basis, trying to re-divert National Guard personnel to perform domestic law enforcement functions. And that can occur at the state level. So, for example, states need to be able to call on their National Guard to respond to natural disasters, hurricanes, firefighting, all sorts of things that might come up in that particular state along those lines, where people are rely on the National Guard to supplement first responders, to supplement local and state personnel, to assist when the states really are in need of the special services that National Guard can provide. And then from a national security perspective, we really need to be having a conversation about the fact that they are being diverted from preparing for their mission. So there really turns out to be a military readiness challenge, because National Guard in its federal capacity is called up to assist the Department of Defense and is part of the fighting forces in our overseas missions.
Carrie Cordero, Andrew McCabe, I appreciate it. Thank you. Coming up next, just days after his former national security advisor's home and office are searched, the president singles out another former ally turned vocal critic, Chris Christie.
Look, Chris is a slob. Everybody knows it.
It was more than a personal attack. We'll talk about the president's suggestion that Christie, like Bolton, should be investigated, and we'll speak with yet another former administration insider who's worried he'll be next. And later, the Epstein case and the additional evidence about him and Ghislaine Maxwell that House lawmakers are now demanding.